The stars outside Europa's command center flickered, swallowed by the darkness as the last vestiges of the sun disappeared behind Jupiter's massive bulk. Inside the dimly lit war room, Captain Alexis Draven stood before a large holographic display, her sharp eyes scanning the data feeds. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt anything resembling peace. The hum of the room's equipment was the only sound, broken only by the occasional clicking of a keyboard. Around her, the members of the Europa Defense Force, EDF, worked tirelessly, their faces gaunt from hours of non-stop preparation. They were on the brink, and everyone knew it. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Harper called out, his voice low but urgent. "We've got an anomaly coming out of the gas giant's shadow. It's huge." Alexis didn't flinch, her fingers moving over the controls of the display with practiced ease. "What's the size, Lieutenant?" "Size is massive, Captain." "Not one ship, dozens," Harper replied, the urgency in his tone growing. "We're looking at a fleet." "Confirmed?" "This isn't a rogue asteroid or a mistake?" Alexis asked, her voice a sharp command, one that cut through the tension. She needed facts, not speculation. "Confirmed," Harper said, his fingers dancing across his terminal. "They're on an intercept course. At current speed, they'll reach the outer perimeter in less than 30 minutes. Get me a direct line to the fleet commander. Now." A moment passed before Commander Lee's face appeared on the screen, his brow furrowed. "Alexis, we've got incoming. The Xylar fleet. They've breached the outer defense grid." "How many?" "Too many," Lee replied, his voice steady but laced with the strain of the situation. "We've got at least 36 ships, maybe more. Advanced tech. And they're moving fast." Alexis stared at the glowing projections of the alien ships on the screen. The Xylar. Cold, calculating, and relentlessly superior. Their weapons outclassed anything humanity had ever developed, and their ships. Nothing short of intimidating. With their hyper-advanced weaponry, they could turn Europa's defenses into scrap within hours. No one had ever successfully held a siege against them. "Then we prepare for impact. Evacuate civilians to shelter immediately, and get the remaining fighters ready to intercept," Alexis ordered. Her mind raced with the implications. There was no time for hesitation. The Xylar had arrived. "Copy that," Lee acknowledged. "We'll start evacuating now, but we can't keep them safe for long. You're going to need more than just your fighters to stop this." "I'm aware," Alexis muttered, turning away from the holographic display as she grabbed her sidearm from the table. She wasn't just a strategist, she was a soldier, and she was ready for what was coming. The first blast hit the outer walls just as Alexis was strapping on her helmet. The room shook with the force of the explosion, knocking several officers off balance. The lights flickered, and a series of alarms blared throughout the command center. "Damage report," Alexis barked, pushing forward to the command station. "Outer shield generators are at 60% capacity and falling," Harper reported, his voice taut with concern. "We won't last long if this keeps up." "How long until we can reinforce?" Alexis asked, her mind already calculating options. "At least 2 hours to get the generators back online if we're lucky," Harper replied. "But they're hitting us with everything they've got. Our tech is outdated compared to theirs." Alexis didn't flinch. "Then we'll improvise." She turned to the rest of her officers. "All non-essential personnel, evacuate to the safe zones. Move it. We're turning the outer perimeter into a war zone. Get me every available fighter and drop them into the atmosphere. I want a blockade. We won't let them land." Harper nodded. "On it. I'll notify the ground forces to take cover inside the tunnels." The sound of distant explosions rattled the walls again, signaling the first wave of Xylar bombardment had hit. The clock was ticking. Europa had never faced a threat like this. "Captain Draven," a voice called from the doorway. Sergeant Mira, a veteran of the EDF's elite Special Ops unit, stood there, her eyes grim. "The civilians, they're too exposed. I suggest we move them to the secondary shelters beneath the city core. It's our best chance at keeping them alive. Alexis met her eyes for a long moment. They both knew that even the core shelters wouldn't guarantee safety against an enemy with the Xylar's capabilities. But she also knew Mira was right. There were too many civilians scattered across the surface, too few resources to protect them all. Get them underground. Now, Alexis said with a finality that brooked no argument. Sergeant Mira saluted and hurried off to coordinate the evacuation. As Alexis stood at the command center, the seconds felt like hours. She watched as the Xylar ships closed in. Their immense size was nothing short of terrifying, each one a towering monolith of alien engineering. The first volley came in just as Europa's fighters launched from their hidden base. The enemy's weapons lit up the darkness, a burst of energy brighter than any star, raining down on the planet's surface. "This is it," Alexis murmured under her breath. There would be no reinforcements. No backup from Earth. This was it. "Captain," Harper's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got a communication from Xylar Fleet Command. They're demanding unconditional surrender." "Put it through," Alexis replied, her voice cold and resolute. The screen flickered, and an image of a dark, alien figure appeared. Tkay, the Xylar strategist, stared back at her with unnerving calm. His pale, reptilian features were sharp and angular, his eyes glowing faintly. There was no mistaking the arrogance in his gaze. "Captain Draven," he spoke in a smooth, almost melodic voice. "You know the outcome of this war. Humanity cannot hope to win against us. Surrender now, and we will grant you mercy. Refuse, and we will annihilate every last one of you." Alexis's grip tightened on the control panel, her knuckles white. "Mercy," she scoffed. "You don't even know what that word means." Tkay's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no humor in it. "Your resistance will be futile, Captain. It is simply a matter of time." "We'll see about that," Alexis replied, her voice hardening with resolve. She cut the connection before Tkay could respond. The room fell into a tense silence. "You heard him," Alexis said, turning to her officers. "We fight. We hold the line." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything they stood to lose. The siege had begun. And as the first wave of Xylar assault ships rained fire down upon Europa, Alexis Draven knew there was no turning back. Humanity's last stand had begun. The atmosphere on Europa was thick with tension as the sun dipped behind Jupiter's massive shadow. The Xylar fleet had already launched several more waves of bombardment, and the planet's outer defenses were on the brink of collapse. The EDF had been stretched thin, and Alexis Draven knew they couldn't hold out much longer in a head-on battle. If they were going to survive, they had to think outside the box. In the war room, Alexis paced back and forth, her mind racing. The alien onslaught had cut off their communications with Earth, and their shield generators were slowly giving way. Europa's defensive lines, though formidable at one point, now seemed laughable in comparison to the Xylar's advanced weaponry. The idea of holding their ground with brute force was impossible. They needed to get smarter. "Lieutenant Harper," Alexis snapped, turning sharply. "What's the status on the smuggler contact?" Harper, his face a mixture of concern and resolve, keyed something into his terminal. "They're ready. The group's leader, Kashikade, just confirmed they're waiting at the rendezvous point. They've got the stealth tech we need." Alexis didn't need to hear more. "Good. Prep a strike team. We're going off the grid." The rendezvous point was on Europa's dark side, a jagged canyon littered with ice caves and half-buried structures. The human settlement here was long abandoned, leaving only the desperate remnants of a past colony, but it provided the perfect hideout. As Alexis stepped off the transport shuttle, her boots crunched into the icy ground. The air was bitterly cold, and the wind howled through the narrow ravines. Yet, it was the silence that unsettled her more than anything else. No alarms, no explosions, just the quiet hum of her team's weapons systems, ready for action. The team moved quickly through the shadows, navigating the icy terrain with precision. Their mission, to infiltrate the Xylar's forward command post and sabotage their communications, buy time for the rest of the fleet to reorganize, and strike back at the heart of the alien command structure. The odds were slim, but Alexis knew they couldn't afford to wait for a miracle. As they approached the rendezvous point, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a tall woman with short, black hair and a rugged look about her, wrapped in layers of fur and tech-enhanced armor. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a certain toughness about her, a certainty that no amount of danger could shake. "Captain Draven," Kasha Cade said, her voice low and measured. "I'm not a fan of taking sides in a war, but I don't like seeing a planet fall. If you're serious about giving the Xylar hell, you'll want this." She gestured to the massive bag slung over her shoulder, filled with gear that looked as though it had been scavenged from every corner of the solar system. Kasha opened the bag, revealing a series of small, compact devices. "This," she said, picking up one of the gadgets, "is a signal disruptor. It'll take out their communications for a while. It won't stop their artillery, but it'll screw with their coordination." Alexis took the disruptor in her gloved hands, turning it over. "It'll have to be enough." "Not just enough," Kasha replied, her voice firm. "We're not here to survive, we're here to make sure they don't win. You've got the brains, I've got the tools. Let's get to work." They moved swiftly through the labyrinth of ice caves and crumbling outposts, with Kasha leading the way. The team, armed with the best weapons they could scrounge together, followed her in tight formation. The journey was slow, the need for stealth paramount. Every crunch of ice beneath their feet, every creak of old structures, felt like it might give them away. "How many Xylar are we up against?" Sergeant Mira asked in a whisper, her breath fogging in the freezing air. Kasha glanced back, her eyes scanning the icy expanse. "Too many to count, but there's a blind spot in their security grid about a kilometer ahead. We'll slip in undetected, plant the disruptors, and slip out." "Just like that?" Mira raised an eyebrow. "Just like that," Kasha said, giving her a smirk. "You've got to trust me. This tech is better than anything your enemy's got." The team pressed on, the miles seeming to stretch on forever. The cold was biting, and exhaustion threatened to take over, but Alexis kept her mind focused. The mission had to succeed. It was their best shot at survival. As they neared the edge of the Xylar's forward base, they finally saw the massive outline of the command station in the distance. The towering structure was surrounded by energy shields, its silhouette jagged and foreboding against the stark horizon. Alexis's heart raced. This was it. "Everyone, stay sharp," Alexis ordered in a hushed tone. "We hit them fast, we hit them hard. No heroics. We're in and out." They split into two groups, with Alexis, Kasha, and Mira heading for the main entrance, while the rest of the team took a secondary route. The Xylar didn't expect an attack on this scale, not yet. The element of surprise was their only advantage. Kasha slipped forward with ease, disabling a series of external sensors along the perimeter of the base. With each device she disabled, Alexis felt a small surge of hope. They were getting closer. Inside, the command post was a labyrinth of dark corridors and high-tech control rooms, the air thick with the hum of alien machinery. As they moved deeper into the heart of the base, Alexis could feel the weight of every step. The tension was suffocating, the quiet deadly. Any wrong move, and they'd be swarmed by Xylar soldiers. Finally, they reached the central communications hub. The room was lit by cold, blue lights, and rows of alien consoles blinked and hummed with activity. Alexis nodded to Kasha, who immediately got to work. Her fingers flew across the controls, a mixture of human intuition and alien tech guiding her movements. 5 minutes, Kasha muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to make this quick." "Ready," Alexis replied, her pulse steady despite the stakes. Mira stood by the door, weapon raised, eyes scanning for any movement. A loud crack sounded through the corridor. A flash of movement. Xylar soldiers. "Get ready," Alexis hissed. "Stay sharp." As the first soldier appeared at the end of the hall, Mira opened fire. The blast echoed through the facility, and the Xylar soldier crumpled to the floor. Alexis stepped forward, her own weapon aimed at the next target. The firefight was brutal and fast. Xylar reinforcements poured in, their weapons glowing with energy. But the humans had the element of surprise, and the superior tactics. They fought with everything they had, each move calculated, each shot deliberate. Kassia's fingers danced over the console. "Done," she called, her voice sharp with triumph. "Disruptors are online. They won't be able to communicate for hours." The team didn't waste a moment. They fled back through the base, retracing their steps, knowing that every second counted. The Xylar were no longer caught off guard. The alarms blared, and enemy soldiers flooded the corridors. They were outnumbered, but not outsmarted. The team reached their extraction point just as reinforcements arrived. With the disruptors successfully planted, the first phase of their mission was complete. As they boarded the transport shuttle and lifted off, Alexis allowed herself a moment of relief, but only a moment. "We've got a shot," she said, her voice steady. "Now we need to make it count." Mira gave a nod. "Let's finish this." Kassia's smirk was fleeting but genuine. "Next time, we get to hit them harder." The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Alexis believed they might just have a chance. The first light of a new day shone weakly over Europa's icy surface, casting long shadows across the war-torn landscape. The battle had reached a new, terrifying intensity. The Xylar were relentless, their technology outmatching anything humanity had ever created. Yet, in the heart of Europa's command center, Alexis Draven felt something shift. They had disrupted the Xylar's communications, yes, but it wasn't enough. It had bought them time to rethink, to regroup, and to attack. But now, the real challenge began. Inside the command center, Alexis stood before a massive display, watching as the status updates scrolled across the screen. The Xylar fleet hadn't retreated, they had adapted. They were now coordinating their attack with a cold efficiency that bordered on terrifying. Their artillery strikes were more precise, their ships more maneuverable. "Captain," Harper's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got a new problem. The Xylar are deploying ground forces. They're coming for the city center." Alexis clenched her jaw. "How long do we have?" "Less than 30 minutes. We're estimating a full invasion." She turned to Mira, who was monitoring a different section of the room. "Mira, get the ground forces ready. We'll need every soldier we've got." Mira nodded. "Already on it, Captain. I'll make sure the last of the civilians are secured and then rally the defense lines." "Good," Alexis said, rubbing a hand over her face. The fatigue was setting in. She hadn't slept in days, not since the first wave of attacks. But there was no time for rest now. She needed to focus. "Lieutenant Harper," Alexis continued, "get me a direct line to Kassia. We're not going to sit here and wait to be overrun." "Understood, Captain." A few minutes later, the screen flickered to life, and Kassia Cade's face appeared, her features grim. "We've got a situation. The Xylar aren't just coming for the city, they're moving in on the last of our fighter bays. If they hit that, we're done." Alexis's mind raced. The fighter bays were their last line of defense. Without them, they wouldn't be able to stop the Xylar bombardment from decimating the surface. "How far out are they?" "Not far. I can give you 2 minutes before they reach the perimeter," Kassia said. "But I've got an idea. It's risky, but it might just work." Alexis raised an eyebrow. "What's the plan?" "We're going to take the fight to them, directly. I've got a small team of operatives who can hack into their internal systems. We can trigger a full systems failure in their fleet." "Can you guarantee we won't be exposed?" Alexis asked, skepticism creeping into her voice. Kassia smiled faintly. "It's a gamble. But if we time it right, we'll disable their entire fleet for long enough to make our move." Alexis leaned forward, her face hard with determination. "Do it." The plan was simple, if dangerous. Cassia's team would infiltrate the Xylar's flagship, the Xylar, and plant a virus in their central control systems. With luck, it would disrupt their fleet's communication and weapons systems for enough time to allow Europa's last remaining fighters to take the offensive. However, there was no margin for error. If they failed, Europa would be lost. Alexis gathered her team, Mira, Harper, and a handful of the most experienced EDF soldiers. They would take the ground assault on the fighter base, acting as a diversion while Cassia's team made their move. Remember, Alexis addressed them in the briefing room, this is our last chance. We need to buy Cassia enough time to pull this off. If we fail, it's over. Do not let that happen. Mira cracked her neck, her expression hardening. No pressure, Captain. We've got this. Harper adjusted his tactical visor and nodded. We're ready. Let's hit them where it hurts. The strike team, wearing stealth suits and armed to the teeth, moved silently through the labyrinthine tunnels beneath Europa's surface. Their target, the fighter base outer defense grid, the last line of defense before the enemy would gain access to the hangars. The walls seemed to pulse with the hum of distant explosions as the Xylar artillery continued their relentless bombardment. But the deeper the team moved, the more focused they became. There was no room for mistakes now. The mission had one goal: keep the fighter base intact long enough for Cassia to disable the Xylar fleet. As they approached the main chamber, Alexis signaled for the team to stop. She peered through a reinforced glass panel into the vast bay. Xylar forces were already positioning their heavy artillery, ready to breach the defenses. The fighters were still secured, but not for long. We don't have much time, Alexis whispered. Harper, Mira, you're with me. We breach the outer door, take out the first wave. Keep them distracted. The rest of you, hold this position until we're clear. The team nodded. Mira gave a quick thumbs up, and Harper checked his weapon one last time. They were ready. Alexis's hand hovered over the control panel, and with a sharp motion, she slammed the activation switch. The door's reinforced metal slammed open with a thunderous crash, sending a shockwave through the room. The first wave of Xylar soldiers turned in surprise. But they didn't hesitate. They charged. Fire! Alexis shouted, as her team opened fire, their weapons roaring to life. The battle erupted instantly. The air was thick with the sound of blaster fire and the clash of armored bodies. Mira, her weapon flashing in precision bursts, took out 2 Xylar soldiers in a single sweep. Harper moved like a shadow, eliminating targets with cold efficiency. Alexis herself engaged in hand-to-hand combat with a Xylar officer, her combat knife flashing as she drove it deep into the alien's chest. For every soldier they took down, 3 more appeared. The numbers were overwhelming, but the team's strategy was clear: hold the line and give Cassia enough time. Status update? Alexis grunted, ducking behind a stack of crates as a barrage of plasma bolts whizzed overhead. Almost there. Cassia's voice crackled through the comm were inside the Xylar's systems. Just a few more seconds. Seconds felt like hours. The battle in the fighter bay was fierce, but Alexis could feel the shift. The Xylar were not expecting this level of resistance. They were not expecting humans to fight with this kind of desperation. And then, it came. Do it now! Cassia's voice rang out. There was a deafening roar, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything seemed to stop. The Xylar's fleet went dark. Their weapons flickered and then shut down completely. The chaos in the fighter bay abruptly ceased, the remaining Xylar soldiers confused and disoriented. We've got it! Cassia shouted, triumphant. The fleet's disabled. We've got 2 hours before they reboot. Alexis's heart raced. Get our fighters airborne now. The team didn't hesitate. Within moments, Europa's remaining fighters were in the air, engaging the now vulnerable Xylar fleet. It was humanity's first real shot at victory. Let's finish this, Alexis muttered under her breath. She wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Not now. Not ever. The tide of battle had shifted, but the war was far from over. And for the first time, Alexis believed they could win.